Alright guys, so today's video is actually going to be a little more controversial than normal because we're going to be talking about controversial stocks and my opinion on whether or not it's okay to invest in them, both from purely a business or investment kind of perspective, as well as more of a moral or ethical perspective as well. And the reason why I'm doing this video is because I often get comments asking me why I choose to invest in controversial companies that they feel are doing something bad or unethical or just kind of something that they generally disagree with. Basically saying that I shouldn't be supporting these companies by investing in their stock because they are bad companies from their point of view. So maybe in the future, when I get more comments like this, I can just kind of point them to this video, and that way they can get my overall perspective on the topic. And that's kind of why I'm doing this video. Now, I am 100% not saying that my views on this are correct. In fact, I think that when asking this question, I actually think the best overall answer is to always do what you think is best and what you feel most comfortable with. If there's a company that you don't agree with and you want to boycott the stock, then by all means do so. I 100% support your right to do whatever you want with your hard-earned money. And I'm not here to convince you of anything else, and I'm certainly not going to lecture you about politics or religion, society, or anything else on this channel. I welcome all views, all backgrounds, all political parties, religions, races, genders, or anything else. I love every single one of you, and I respect all of your different views and opinions, and I hope that you know that. Now, I'm only going to share my personal opinion on this topic when it comes to investing in stocks, and I promise to be as unbiased as possible, to look at this question objectively without taking any sides and just giving you my reasons on why I generally don't actively boycott most stocks in the market, even if they're controversial. And there's actually a little bit of an exception to that, which I will cover later on in the video, that does make me sound a little bit like a hypocrite, but we'll touch on that a little bit later. Okay, so before I can give you my thoughts on all of this, we should probably define what it even means for a stock to be controversial, right? So because not everyone agrees on what is actually right or wrong, morally and ethically and all that kind of stuff, I think that an easy kind of broad definition that we could use here is to simply have it define it as a company that is doing something that many people disagree on. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's good or bad unless they're just kind of like flat out breaking the law or something very serious like that. But in most cases, I think we can just look at this as something that a company is doing or a product that they sell that some people might actually like or think is good. Some people might not really care about it, and some people might actually think that it's wrong or unethical or bad or, so on. So for example, think of oil companies. I mean, many people think that they're needed because oil and gas is essential to so many things that we do in life, while others think that they're bad for the environment, especially in the whole climate change movement, and that we need to move towards renewables instead, which, by the way, some people think that that in itself has some elements of corruption too. So you can see how the whole thing tends to be heavily argued over. But some stocks there might include companies like Chevron, Shell, Mobil, and a lot more. Perhaps a more kind of one-sided example, though, would be sin stocks. Companies like Altria and Philip Morris that have ownership of cigarette brands which have been linked to cancer. There's also alcohol companies like Anheuser-Busch or Constellation Brands. There's military and defense companies like Lockheed Martin and Boeing who supply weapons during war and conflict. And there's even gambling and casino companies like Wynn, Caesars, MGM, and more, where people go to their casinos and oftentimes lose a lot of money. But even there, you could still make an argument that these companies should be allowed to exist. Like with cigarettes, alcohol, and gambling, while some might argue that these companies use predatory tactics, others might argue that people have the freedom to make their own choices in life, and because these companies aren't literally forcing anyone to buy their products, they shouldn't be held liable for their decisions. And even with military and weapons companies, some might argue that they're needed for defense purposes against enemies that want to cause others harm. Again, I'm not saying that any of these are my held views or beliefs. I'm just saying that these are things that people generally argue over. And of course, there's other examples of companies and tactics and ideologies that people argue over. For example, there's a lot of social media companies, and lately there's been a lot of controversy over how much they censor or if they don't even censor enough. There are companies like Palantir who have direct ties to the government and helping them with things like border patrol or helping them overseas in war and conflict and stuff like that. A lot of people argue about these topics too. And earlier I mentioned Anheuser-Busch, right? Well, most recently there was also a lot of backlash over certain companies being too quote unquote woke, which we've seen examples of in Bud Light, Disney, and even Target. And again, these are controversial because some people agree with what they're doing while others disagree. Some people actually want these companies to actively show support for some of these movements, while others are completely against it and feel that companies should just stay out of politics and other social topics. But whether you think that any of this is good or bad is going to depend heavily on where you stand yourself with your own held beliefs. Of course, there's also more nuanced examples though, like I think Robinhood would be a great example. This is a company that I really like because they pioneered commission-free stock trading, which I think benefits so many people. But at the same time, they've done some pretty shady things in the past, like halting the trading of GameStop and other meme stocks when regular traders found a way to beat the rich elites at their own game. And that was something that, caused a lot of backlash as well. There's also Big Pharma, which has undoubtedly saved many lives, but at the same time has pushed certain drugs onto people that many don't consider to be healthy. And especially during the pandemic with companies like Pfizer and Moderna, we saw huge arguments break out everywhere over the V shots. Very polarizing subject, right? There's people that have very strong opinions on either side of it. Some people showing huge support for them, while others are completely against it. And again, there are people in the middle too, but it's still a very polarizing subject to this day that many people argue over, and that's what makes it controversial. And hey, there's even companies like Tesla who sometimes see a bit of a reversal in terms of who supports them. Like I've actually been invested in Tesla for many years, and I can remember when liberals used to really love Tesla and Elon Musk because they saw him as someone who was challenging big oil and forcing the automotive industry to shift towards electric. So they really liked him for the environment, for climate change, and those type of more so left-leaning movements. But if you fast forward to today, there's actually a lot of conservatives that now see Musk as their savior after purchasing Twitter, allowing more conservative voices back onto that platform, and even being critical at times of the Biden administration. And obviously there's way more to all of this, and I'm making some huge generalizations here about liberals and conservatives, when in reality there's actually a lot of overlap and sharing of opinions, and even some of the criticisms for Elon Musk specifically don't even have to do with politics at all, but rather just some people feeling like he overpromises and underdelivers as a CEO, as a leader of Tesla, while others feel that he's been pushing the boundaries and attempting to do things that everyone else is too afraid to try, so they see him as a bit of a visionary as well. But anyway, the point is that some of these companies can be a little more fluid with big swings up and down in terms of support, and where you stand yourself is always going to depend just very, very heavily on your own held beliefs and your own values. So it can be a bit subjective at times, I would say. And of course, there are arguments that can be made for some of this to be objective, but I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible. So I'm trying to stay away from giving any kind of right or wrong decisions on any of this. I'm trying not to judge any of this. I'm just kind of saying these are some controversial things that people usually argue over and heavily debate. Okay, now obviously there's a ton more examples that we could run through. I mean, I could probably find controversies with almost every single company in the world if I really tried, which by the way, I will touch on that in just a second when I defend my case for why I'm still investing in some companies that tend to be controversial. But now that we have some understanding on what controversial stocks are, let's try to answer whether it's okay to invest in them. Well, starting from just an investment or business perspective alone, I would say that it depends on whether or not you're already in the stock yourself, because in most cases, being controversial is going to hurt the business. That's not always the case, but many times when you're splitting up your audience into separate groups, causing them to either support you or to boycott you, well, what you're really doing is you're just limiting your total addressable market, which means lower growth or sometimes even declining sales. And if that's the case, then the stock price will probably take a hit as a result. And if you're already in the stock, then that's definitely not something that you want to see from your stock. So you want the stock and the company to really grow and become larger over time. And that's going to mean not getting involved in some of these controversial topics. As much as, you might want them to be on your side, sometimes it's best for them to just kind of stay out of it so that you don't alienate any of your fan base, and you can just have the biggest possible addressable market to sell your product to as many people as possible and make as much money as you can from just a business perspective alone. However, if you're not already in the stock, well, then you may actually want to consider buying into it if it's a beaten down stock that is sinking because of controversies, but you feel that they can actually right the ship and turn things around over time. Because if that's the case, you might be able to get a much lower price than you ever thought possible. And one example of that could be Disney. I'm not saying that it is, but it could be. Disney is a world leader in entertainment with many iconic brands, but over the past couple years, it's been crashing into the ground, now trading for one of the lowest prices of the past decade, which I never thought I would see again myself. And granted, there are many business-specific reasons for this, like their declining networks business and the high costs of transitioning over to video streaming. But it is likely also being fueled by some consumer backlash as well. I mean, they've had several blockbuster flops in the theaters recently, with The Marvels being the worst performing Marvel movie of all time, and we've even seen their Disney Plus memberships fall at times too. The concern being that they focus more on ideology rather than the quality of the product. Now, whether you think any of that is good or bad, that's not the point. That's not what I'm arguing here. I'm not saying that it is good or that it's bad. I'm just talking about it from a business perspective alone. You can see here that the fan base is being split a little bit right now, which is generally not great for your business. But if Disney can navigate their way through the controversies and fix some of their other business issues too, then over time, this could be one heck of an undervalued stock here that you may not have otherwise gotten for that low of a price if it wasn't for these controversies. Now, obviously, things could just get worse and the stock could keep sinking, but that's why it's more of a case-by-case situation that does depend on how much risk you're willing to accept yourself. Personally, I like Disney stock at these levels. I think the risk is worth it, and so I've been buying the stock myself. Okay, so moving on to part two though, is it okay from a moral or ethical standpoint to invest in a company that you disagree with? Well, again, do whatever you think is best, or at least talk to a family member or a pastor or someone with more kind of ethical or moral responsibility than just some random YouTuber like myself. But if you want to know what my personal opinion is, just my opinion, then here it is. On an ideological level, I generally don't avoid investing in most controversial stocks. There is some exception to this, again, which I mentioned before. I will touch on that in just a second. It does make me sound like a bit of a hypocrite, but in most cases, I don't avoid really any stocks in the market. And there are three main kind of quick reasons that I can give you for that. Reason number one is that I just don't think that avoiding a stock would really do much anyway. And I also don't really hold very strong opinions on controversial topics either. I'm a bit of a libertarian in that I think that people should just kind of be allowed to do whatever they think is best, as long as they're not hurting anyone, of course. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing. I probably should pay more attention to what's going on in the world and maybe be more active about it. But I'm also just really busy every day, and I also like to get along with people. So for those reasons, I generally avoid these very divisive or controversial topics, arguing over politics or religion or other things, because I like to get along with people. I don't want, anyone hating me. I know maybe I should pay more attention. Maybe I should care more about stuff, but I generally avoid these controversial topics. However, even if I did disagree with something that a company is doing, I also just don't think that avoiding the stock would really do much. Because the truth is that small retail investors and traders like you and me have very little influence over the stock market. When you see a stock price going up or down, the vast majority of that is actually being caused by giant whales, these huge investment banks and hedge funds and asset management companies. These gigantic entities sometimes spend billions of dollars at a time, while the rest of us are are spending the few bucks that we can afford when we're not drowning in debt or waiting for our next paycheck. Now, granted, as a whole, if we all got together and we did the exact same thing at about the same time, then yeah, we would have more influence over the stock market. But think about it this way: the majority of consumers out there don't even pay attention to stocks, and even the ones that do are not likely to start shorting a stock with you just because the business is controversial. It would probably take a lot of convincing for them to actively be doing things like that with their money. So, what I'm saying here is that I just feel that there's not a lot of power in avoiding stocks. But where I do think that there is a lot of power is in what we do as consumers. If you really want to hurt a company and the stock, well, you kind of have to boycott them as a consumer, because it's much easier to get a big group together to act in unison and just not spend money on a certain brand. That's not hard at all. And that's why we see all the time, really, people from all sides of the aisle doing things like this: liberals, conservatives, vegetarians, religious people, even atheists, whatever it is. We often see these groups get together and boycott certain brands, which does affect the company, it does affect their brand, it does affect their financials, and it does affect their stock price. Because after all, the vast majority of the world economy is consumer driven. So that's really where I see more of an ability to actually protest the company rather than just avoiding the stock. But granted, if you think that something is so bad or immoral or unethical, like maybe a cigarettes company or some other company that builds missiles for war, and you feel like it's going to be killing innocent people, and you just don't want to have any kind of tie to that company, even if it's just by owning one single share, you just want to be completely detached from them. Well, guys, I totally understand where you're coming from. In fact, I've actually thought about owning a cigarette related stock and a weapon stock in the past, but I held back just because my gut didn't feel good about it. And I don't have a very good or perfect logical reason for that. I know I'm sounding like a bit of a hypocrite based on everything I've been saying, and still what I have more to say, but I just didn't feel good about it, so I stayed away. And all I'm saying is that I can 100% understand where all of you are coming from on either side of this topic. If you choose to invest in a stock or you choose to avoid it, I think there is some sense to be made on both sides. But again, for me, I generally don't actively avoid most stocks in the market. And reason number two for that is the question of where do I draw the line here? Because if I avoid one stock, I feel like I should probably be avoiding all stocks, since I generally feel that almost every company in the world is doing at least something wrong in some way. And I feel like I'd be a hypocrite to ignore that. So for example, let's say that I'm really passionate about climate change, so I avoid investing in big oil companies. Okay, well, most plastics in the world is made using oil, so should I avoid all plastic products? A lot of transportation using oil. Should I avoid that transportation too? And maybe I just want to avoid the stock, but I still want to use plastics and other things. Okay, fair enough. But if I'm avoiding their stock, then should I also avoid Apple? Because Apple had their iPhones built in China, where they were accused of horrible work environments. Should I avoid all Chinese companies because of what they always get accused of? Should I avoid Amazon because their delivery drivers said that they had to use the bathroom at times in their own vans? Speaking of which, should I avoid Amazon, Walmart, Target, and other large retailers for hurting smaller mom and pop shops? Should I avoid Microsoft and Google for their developments in artificial intelligence if I think that AI has the possibility of maybe destroying all humanity in the future, or at least for their use of all of our data and how intrusive that's become? Should I avoid every big pharma company for all the recalls that they have every year, many of which have caused harm or even death to innocent people? Should I avoid any companies that have any kind of ties to the government at all, because we know that governments around the world are notorious for being very corrupt and taking advantage of people and causing war and all sorts of other conflicts everywhere? Should I avoid stocks like PepsiCo, Nestle, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, and any other company that sells unhealthy foods when cardiac disease is the #1 cause of death in the world? And at the end of the day, haven't all of us worked for some company that we felt wasn't treating their employees right or was taking advantage of them, at least in some way? So then should I avoid every single company in the world because they all do something unethical, at least to some degree? I'm sure you can see where I'm going with all of this, and I'm not trying to say that because all companies do bad things that we should just excuse them for it. I actually think it's great that we bring all of these things to light and that we try to improve the world as much as we can. I'm 100% in support of that. But again, I think that change will likely come more so from what we do as consumers rather than, us tiny investors trying to avoid a particular stock. And finally here, that will actually bring us to reason number 3, which is that as much as we might hate the game, we sometimes have to just kind of play it, because the stock market is, in my opinion, one of the greatest inventions of humankind that has allowed regular people like you and me to become part owners of some of the biggest corporations in history, like Amazon, Microsoft, and so on, where we otherwise would probably never get an opportunity like that. And because of that, I'm actually very thankful for stocks and the stock market. But if we go around boycotting every stock because of moral or ethical reasons, then we leave all of this in the hands of the rich elites, where only they can benefit from these companies. And again, there's a ton of nuance here, and I'm not saying that I'm right in my beliefs here, but I generally feel that all giant corporations are bad to some degree, and it's going to be hard to avoid the entire market on principle. I know you can pick and choose, and I'm not against that. Like I said, I fully support 100%. I support all of your guys' different opinions on this and your perspectives. And if you choose to avoid a stock, go ahead and avoid it, and I support you for that. But if you ask me why I generally don't avoid it, I guess that's my reason. Maybe my opinion will change in the future. Maybe I'll mature more, and I'll pick and choose some stocks to avoid. But in general, I don't know. It's just not something that I actively do. But hey, I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope I didn't offend anyone. That's really the biggest thing that I'm hoping for, because I know all of these topics can be, a little sensitive, and I try to be as unbiased as possible. I hope I achieved at least some level of that. And I just hope that I entertained you and you found the video helpful or entertaining in some way. But thanks again for stopping by, my friends. I really appreciate all of you. Like I said, I love all of you. You're all welcome here on this channel. And please voice any opinion you'd like down below. All I ask is that you please be respectful. Understand that we all have different opinions. Don't try to start a fight with anyone. Just try to be nice to everyone and respect all views. But thanks again, my friends. I hope you're all doing well. I will catch you in the next video. All right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.